I recently started playing a game so weird it made me feel like I was going insane. Was it good? Was it bad? Honestly, I still don't know if I liked it, but I couldn't put it down either. I had been looking for a horror game with a small town mystery vibe. Something in the style of Life is Strange but darker, more horror driven. Maybe something like The Quarry or Until Dawn. While searching, I found a handful of games people recommended that I have never heard of. Then I saw one I had heard of, Alan Wake. I knew the name, but I wasn't sold yet. Later, when I mentioned it to a friend, he said, "That's probably the best game I played this year." That was the final push. I bought it. Backstory to my relationship with this game. I thought Alan Wake came out in 2016. Turns out it actually released in 2010, which shocked me. I've never heard of it until 2016 when some classmates I didn't know too well started talking about it. Since then, everything I've heard about the game has been all over the place. Some call it an underrated masterpiece, others say it's terrible. But what's interesting is that people rarely land in the middle. It's either glowing praise or absolute disappointment. Not many games get that kind of split. So I was hesitant at first. Then I checked Steam and I saw it was 95% off. Within the first 5 minutes, I was instantly disappointed. I wanted a small town mystery game, slow burn horror, eerie locals, something creeping in the shadows, but instead I was immediately fighting shadow monsters. Even Alan himself kind of set me up for disappointment. In the opening narration, he quotes Stephen King.
Stephen King once wrote that nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear.
So imagine me when, not even 10 minutes in, the game already explains what the monsters are and throws me into a fight.
I realized that the hitchhiker was a character from the story I'd been working on.
The hitchhiker has been taken over by the dark presence. You can't hurt him now. The darkness protects him from all harm.
But then, just as quickly, it shifts gear. Alan wakes up from a nightmare. He's on a ferry with his wife Alice, heading towards a small town called Bright Falls. The vibe instantly clicked with me again. A little logging town, a diner, a local festival being set up. It looked like it was going to be that small town mystery after all. And for a small while, it leaned into that. You meet some quirky locals, there's an unsettling old lady that warns you about the dark, and then, of course, things go downhill fast. Alice disappears, Alan dives into Cauldron Lake after her and blacks out. When he wakes up, he's lost a week of his life, his wife is gone, and he has no memory of what happened. From there, the game becomes this constant back and forth between quiet daylight sequences in Bright Falls and nighttime combat against shadowy figures known as the Taken. And here's where my real frustration with the game starts. The pacing. The year is 2010. Alan Wake, a best-selling crime fiction writer suffering from a 2 years of writer's block, travels with his wife Alice to Bright Falls, Washington. Alice hopes the trip will help him relax and maybe spark inspiration. At first, it feels cozy. Alan heads into a diner to pick up keys to their cabin rental, but instead of the mechanic he's supposed to meet, a strange old woman in black gives him directions and cabin key. The cabin itself sits on a tiny island in the middle of Cauldron Lake. Alice surprises Alan by setting up a typewriter, hoping he'll write again. Instead, Alan explodes in anger and storms out. Almost immediately, the lights go out. Alice screams and Alan rushes back inside, only to see her dragged into the lake by a dark entity. He dives in after her and blacks out. When he wakes up, it's a week later. His car has crashed into the woods, Alice is missing, and he starts finding manuscript pages from a novel titled Departure, a novel he apparently wrote but has no memory of creating. Stranger still, the events in the pages begin coming true. From here, Alan's journey spirals. He battles the Taken, shadow-possessed townsfolk. He deals with Dr. Hartman, a shady psychologist who tries to manipulate him. He's constantly harassed by FBI agent Nightingale, who is convinced Alan is dangerous. He learns about Thomas Zane, a poet who once lived on Cauldron Lake and vanished under mysterious circumstances. And he discovers that the dark presence beneath the lake is trying to use his writing to break free. The climax has Alan using a magical light switch called the Clicker to fight back the darkness. He dives into the lake, sacrifices himself and frees Alice, but he ends up trapped in the dark place himself. The game ends with his chilling words, "It's not a lake, it's an ocean." It's a fascinating story, full of Twin Peaks energy, Stephen King vibes, and Remedy's love for blending fiction and reality. The gameplay didn't always match the intrigue of the story. When I say Alan Wake is unique, I mean it. You don't just shoot enemies, you weaken them first with your flashlight, the taken or shielded by darkness, and only when you burn that shield away with light you can actually damage them. At first, this mechanic is brilliant, it creates tension, your flashlight batteries run out, and you're constantly scavenging. Every flare feels like gold, but here's the problem. By hour 3, you've already seen everything this mechanic has to offer. The combat loop never really evolves. You shine the light, you shoot, repeat. Sometimes you get a flare gun or a flashbang. Those moments are great, but mostly it's the same encounters over and over. By the halfway point, I found myself sighing whenever a new wave of enemies spawned. Hope you're enjoying this breakdown so far. If you are, it would mean a lot if you left a like, dropped a comment, or even checked out some of my other videos. It would have helped me out a lot. Anyways, the game tries to spice things up with environmental storytelling and collectibles. There are radios you can listen to, TVs that play Twilight Zone style episodes of Night Springs, and of course, the manuscript pages. Now, this might just be me, but I was never that interested in chasing down collectibles. I didn't go out of my way to find every manuscript page. I understand their narrative purpose, they foreshadow events and add depth, but after a while it started feeling more like homework than intrigue. Here's the core issue. Alan Wake doesn't trust its quiet moments enough. Think about most horror narratives. Until Dawn and the Core build tension slowly, letting normalcy of a small town life lull you before things unravel. On the other side, games like Resident Evil 7 throws you into horror immediately and keep their foot on the gas. Alan Wake sits awkwardly in the middle. It keeps bouncing between calm daylight cutscenes and non-stop night combat. Instead of a slow build into dread, or an unrelenting descent into madness, it feels uneven. I wanted more of Bright Falls, more diner conversations, more weird townies at Deerfest, more "is this town hiding something" vibes. Instead I got Shadow Monster fight after Shadow Monster fight. And when the story is this weird, I wanted that balance. I wanted to be questioning what's real and what's fiction. Instead, the combat always made it clear, this is fiction and you're fighting through it. One of the most interesting choices Remedy made was structuring the game like a TV show. Every chapter ends with a cliffhanger and even fades out to previous on Alan Wake. I actually love this decision. It gives the story momentum, makes it bingeable and leans into that serialized drama vibe, but again, the pacing inside the episode doesn't always land. Sometimes you slog through an hour of near identical combat just to get a 2-minute cutscene. It's style over substance at times. And while the style is great, it doesn't always make the grind worth it. Alan Wake is packed with scripted sequences, bridges collapsing, tornadoes of darkness ripping through forests, set-piece encounters where light saves you at the last second. They look cool, but they don't always feel good as a player. Because so much is scripted, your choice doesn't really matter. There's no branching path, no alternate endings, no real agency. That's fine for a narrative-driven game, but it left me wishing I had just a little more control over how Alan's story unfolded. One thing I will praise endlessly is its thematic depth. Alan's writer's block, his reliance on alcohol, his short temper, it all plays into this idea of fiction bleeding into reality. The Dark Presence exploits his creativity, twisting his stories into weapons. The light versus darkness mechanic isn't just gameplay, it's a metaphor. Alan literally uses light to fight off his demons. And Thomas Zane, Barbara Jagger and the Clicker, all of it ties into this idea of stories having power. It's not subtle, but it's interesting. Remedy leaned hard into Stephen King's Twin Peaks influence, and you can feel it everywhere. From the quirky locals to the unnerving dream logic of Cauldron Lake. Why I couldn't stop playing? Here's the weirdest part. Despite all my complaints, I couldn't put Alan Wake down. Yes, the combat got repetitive. Yes, the pacing frustrated me, but the atmosphere, the mystery, the constant questioning of what the hell is actually happening, kept pulling me back. Even as the next wave of The Taken spawned, I still wanted to see the next episode. I wanted to understand Thomas saying, I wanted to know if Alice was alive, I wanted to know what Alan meant when he said, it's not a lake, it's an ocean. My takeaway. So here's where I land. Alan Wake is an interesting game with a unique style that unfortunately missed the mark in execution. It's not polished enough to stand with the best survival horror, and it's not paced well enough to be the perfect small town mystery thriller. But it's also not boring, far from it. The atmosphere, the story, the episodic structure, they're strong enough to keep you hooked even when the gameplay falters. It feels like a flawed experiment, but one worth experiencing, and honestly, I respect it for that. Remedy swung big, and even though they didn't hit everything, they created a game people still passionately debate over a decade later. And now with Alan Wake 2 finally out, it feels like Remedy has gone back to refine those ideas and deliver on potential the first game hinted at. Final thoughts. So, do I think Alan Wake is a masterpiece? No. Do I think it's terrible? Also, no. It's somewhere in that fascinating middle ground of so ambitious it stumbles, but so unique you can't ignore it. I'll take that over safe, forgettable game any day. Even now, long after I finished it, I keep thinking about Alan's final words. It's not a lake, it's an ocean. Maybe that's a perfect metaphor for the game itself. Bigger, stranger and deeper than it first appears.